The day Patricia Harmon showed up at my door with what she claimed were court documents. I was in the middle of assembling a model train set in my garage. The knock was sharp and insistent, the kind that made you think someone's house was on fire. When I opened the door, there she stood in her trademark purple blazer, holding a manila envelope like it contained nuclear launch codes. "Thomas Mitchell," she announced with the gravity of someone serving a death warrant. "You are hereby summoned to appear in circuit court for violation of HOA Statute 7. 3 subsection B. I stared at the envelope she thrust at me. The thing was sealed with what looked like a gold star sticker from an elementary school teacher supply cabinet. "Patricia, what are you talking about?" Her lips pursed into that familiar expression of righteous indignation. "Your garden statue," she said, pointing at the small ceramic frog I'd placed by my flower bed last week. "It's a clear violation of our decorative guidelines. This is your official summons." I took the envelope, more out of curiosity than concern. Patricia Harmon had been the HOA president of Maple Grove Estates for 3 years, and in that time, she turned our quiet suburban neighborhood into her personal kingdom. But fake court documents. This was a new low, even for her. After she marched off my porch, her heels clicking with military precision, I opened the envelope. What I found inside made me laugh out loud. The document was a mess of legal-sounding gibberish, complete with a case number that looked like she'd just mashed her keyboard. The official seal was clearly photocopied from some government website, and the judge's signature read, "Honorable Judge, Law Person." I spent 20 years working as a compliance officer for a financial firm before retiring early. I knew real legal documents when I saw them, and this wasn't even close. But what really caught my attention was the threat at the bottom. If I didn't appear at this fake court date, she claimed I'd face arrest and up to 30 days in jail. That evening, I called my former colleague, Sandra, who transitioned from finance to law. She nearly choked on her dinner when I read her the document over the phone. "Tom, this is forgery of government documents," she said, her voice shifting from amused to serious. "This is actually a felony." Does she realize what she's done? Apparently not, because the next morning, I found another envelope taped to my door. This one contained what Patricia called a warrant for immediate compliance. She'd gotten bolder, claiming that the sheriff's department had authorized her to collect a $500 fine directly. The letterhead was supposedly from the county sheriff's office, but the font was Comic Sans. I decided to visit the actual courthouse to verify what I already knew. The clerk at the civil division took one look at Patricia's handiwork and immediately called for a supervisor. Within an hour, I was sitting in a small office with Detective Raymond Holloway, who specialized in fraud cases. "We've actually had 2 other complaints about similar documents from your neighborhood," he told me, spreading out the papers on his desk. "But yours are the most elaborate. She's escalating." It turned out Patricia had been sending these fake legal threats to various neighbors for months. Most people had just paid her fines to avoid trouble, thinking they were legitimate HOA penalties. But when she started forging court documents and threatening jail time, she'd crossed into criminal territory. Detective Holloway asked if I'd be willing to help build a case. I agreed immediately. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered evidence with the thoroughness that 2 decades in compliance had taught me. I talked to neighbors, collected copies of Patricia's fake documents, and even recorded our interactions when she came to check on my compliance with her imaginary court order. The breaking point came when Patricia sent out a mass email to the entire HOA, complete with attached legal documents, claiming she'd successfully sued 5 homeowners, including me. She boasted about her legal victories and warned others to fall in line or face similar consequences. What she didn't know was that Detective Holloway was now on our HOA email list, courtesy of my forwarding. 3 days later, the trap was set. Patricia had scheduled an emergency HOA meeting to discuss what she called the epidemic of noncompliance in our neighborhood. She prepared what she claimed were court-ordered injunctions against several homeowners, ready to distribute them publicly to shame us into submission. The community center was packed that Tuesday evening. Patricia stood at the podium in her purple blazer, a stack of her fake documents piled beside her like ammunition. She'd even brought a gavel, though HOA meetings had never required one before. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with self-importance. I've taken the unprecedented step of pursuing legal action against those who refuse to maintain our community standards. These court documents prove that the law is on our side. She held up one of her forgeries, waving it like a flag. That's when the doors opened and Detective Holloway walked in with two uniformed officers. The room went silent except for the squeak of folding chairs as people turned to look. Patricia Harmon. Detective Holloway's voice carried across the room. Patricia's face went through a spectacular range of emotions. Confusion, indignation, then a dawning horror as she realized this wasn't part of her script. Yes, she managed to squeak out. You're under arrest for forgery of government documents, impersonating a government official, and fraud. He nodded to the officers who moved toward the podium. But I'm the HOA president. Patricia shrieked, clutching her fake documents to her chest. I have authority here. These are official HOA legal proceedings. Detective Holloway's expression didn't change. Ma'am, HOA presidents don't have the authority to create court documents or threaten jail time. Please put your hands behind your back. The next few moments were surreal. Patricia tried to argue, claiming she'd found templates online and that everyone did this. When the officers produced handcuffs, she grabbed her gavel and banged it frantically on the podium. I hold you all in contempt, she shouted at the room. This meeting is adjourned. You can't arrest me in my own meeting. But they could, and they did. As I let her out, she was still protesting something about her nephew being a lawyer and how we'd all regret this. The room erupted in whispers and shocked exclamations the moment the door closed behind them. I stood up and walked to the podium where Patricia's fake documents were still scattered. I think we need to elect a new HOA president, I said, and the room burst into applause. The real court proceedings happened 2 months later. I attended every day of Patricia's trial, partly out of curiosity and partly to support the other neighbors who'd been victimized. The prosecutor laid out a devastating case. Patricia had forged over 40 documents, collected nearly $10,000 in fraudulent fines, and threatened at least 15 homeowners with fake legal action. Her defense attorney tried to argue that she'd simply been overzealous in her duties, but the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic document examiner testified that her forgeries were amateurish but deliberate, and several neighbors testified about the stress and financial hardship her schemes had caused. Patricia took the stand on the last day, and it was a spectacular display of deflection and denial. She claimed she'd been trying to maintain property values as she'd never meant to deceive anyone, and that the templates she'd found online looked official, so she'd assumed they were legal to use. When the prosecutor asked her about the fake judge signatures and made-up case numbers, she actually said with a straight face that she thought that's how the system worked for HOA matters. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. When they returned, Patricia stood rigid at the defendant's table, her purple blazer now looking more like a costume than a power suit. The foreman read the verdict with clear conviction. Guilty on all counts. Judge Martin Chun, who presided over the trial with barely concealed incredul at Patricia's actions, scheduled sentencing for the following week. When that day came, the courtroom was packed with Maple Grove residents. Patricia's attorney made a last plea for leniency, citing her lack of prior criminal history and her misguided but well-intentioned efforts to improve the neighborhood. Judge Chun wasn't buying it. His words were measured but stern as he addressed Patricia directly. Ms. Harmon, you violated the public trust in the most egregious way. You weaponized fake legal documents to intimidate and extort your neighbors. You preyed on people's fear of the legal system for your own power and financial gain. He paused, letting his words sink in. For forgery of government documents, 3 counts, I sentence you to 18 months in federal prison. For fraud, you are sentenced to an additional 12 months to be served consecutively. You will also pay full restitution to all victims and a fine of $25,000. Patricia's legs gave out. She collapsed into her chair with a wail that could probably be heard in the parking lot. 30 months, she gasped, her face the color of old paper. But I was just trying to keep the neighborhood nice.